Good evening, dobroveče svima, svim zelenim aktivistima u Srbiji, and good evening to our friends from European Greens. I'm very happy that we have this great honor to have a visit in the middle of our quite hectic campaign for the elections, where we expect some, let's say, good, so to say, historic result. I don't know if our European friends would know, but all Serbian elections are historic elections. There's almost none that is not. So in this way, I mean, we have a chance, and we hope to have a chance this time to win the Belgrade elections and to have the largest ever Green group in the city assembly. Woohoo! Yeah. You see? Everybody reacts. The nature reacts. All right. So that's great. And then also we are in the beginning of the process that will lead to European election in May and June, or in June, 20-something, 21st, yeah, 26 to 9 June, which has its own challenges. And these challenges may be similar or originate in the same place, but you know, the contexts are quite different. And I'm happy that tonight we will talk about these contexts, that we will talk about what will be the major challenges of the European Green parties ahead of European elections. And then we will also have our political activists and members of our parties here to see if these challenges are similar, or how similar they are, or how different they are, and what can we learn from each other on this way forward. I think it is also important that we need to somehow, in whatever elections we go, we need to send this strong green message and to understand what our voters are expecting from us. And that brings me to the point that I think it is very important that regardless of the context we go, we need to kind of try to protect our identities that we built, well, in Europe a little bit longer, from 60s and 70s, and in Serbia a little bit, let's say, later, latecomer, but still we went through a, let's say, grassroots part as Ne davimo Beograd that is still very close to our hearts. And then we ran unsuccessfully in the first elections, then we learned our lessons, then we recuperated, we built a momentum for the last elections, and now we are a year later after last elections, which again historically brought the Green members to National Assembly and to City Assembly. We are now a political party. In parallel, our partners from the Zajedno party also ran with us last elections, and we ran together in these elections that are coming, and also have their own path and build their own structures that are, and we know, also a bit developed more in some other cities where we do not have such a strong presence. So I think that with this we need to kind of go together further. And that is basically how I want to open. But before that, I want to present tonight's panelists. Rasmus Nordqvist, former member of the Danish Parliament and committee member of the European Green Party, is here with us. Then Biljana Đorđević, co-president of the Green Left Front, and Kristina Milošević, International Secretary of Zajedno party, will be our panelists. My name is Marko Vujačić. I'm International Secretary of the Green Left Front. And I would like to start by talking with, to ask first Rasmus to give us a little bit of a context of the European elections. Like, what are the messages, what are the key messages you're expecting to deliver to European voters in the late spring, beginning of summer? And to what extent these Dutch elections that send a shockwave through Europe, what do you think, how will they influence the positioning of the Green parties in Europe? What are the origins of this right-wing growth? It's not just Netherlands, it's also in Italy, though it proved to be maybe not so right-wing at the end, or not so extreme. Okay, we'll see. And, you know, connected to that, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that I think that the fear was much greater. And then Georgia came, and she was kind of, well, let's go to Brussels, let's do this and that, let's cooperate and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask, like, what is how is this challenging the green message in Europe? I think that is my main question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us here in the middle of the election. And we know it's not only historic, but also very busy. And it's busy because it's very important election, not just for you, but actually for Europe as well. You start by talking about what's happened in the Netherlands or in Italy. We could also talk about what happened in Poland, where actually there was a success in a change of power, or even in Spain also, where our good green friends also succeeded in keeping the extreme right out of power. But indeed, it is a big question. I mean, to begin with, it's always when you start up election to look back at what have happened since the last election, and it was in 19, and we had the last European election, and it was historic, because it was the first time we had a real climate election in Europe, and it was the first time we saw that the youth were actually in the streets taking the power and were listened to. So that was truly historic and very important. And what we've seen in the last 4.5 years is actually a move in politics in EU. We've seen the Green Deal, which is a good start. Some people say it's fantastic, and now the green transition has started in Europe. I'm always a bit like, yes, it's the beginning. We have set some targets, but we still need to go the way. But then something has happened the last year, is that we've seen a push against the green agenda. We've seen it specifically from the right-wing party, both the more traditional right-wing, the EPP, and of course the extreme right. We saw it this spring when there was a very important nature restoration law was supposed to go through the European Parliament. And you know, we sit in the member states always counting on the European Parliament to be the progressive ones. They're the ones who actually push for something, and then we take fights up in the member states. But this time around, we saw a pushback from the conservatives and the extreme rights against the nature restoration law, and it was almost about to fall. They didn't succeed, but it was close. We've seen it lately, just a few weeks ago, with a very important legislation on pesticide, the use of pesticides in Europe. And they actually succeeded in bringing it down. So from the election in 19, positive vibe, Green Deal, we saw the commissioner president being out saying, now we start the green transition, till now where we all of a sudden see this stop. So that's the reality. The reality is also a French president who asked for a pause in green legislation because we've done it too much. I mean, we need to bring people on board. So our answer to this is no, we just begun. But what we need to do now is to bring social transformation and green transition together. That's why we call in this election, we call for a green and social deal, because the problem have been in what we have seen is we're doing some good targets, we're doing good steps on renewable energy, for example, but we forget how to bring everybody on board. We forget that still people in Europe in energy poverty who cannot afford heating. And we need to think these things together now. So that is our answer to what we've seen from the right wing. And then, as you rightly say, it was a shock to see what happened in the Netherlands in the election with Geert Wilders growing in 2 weeks' time. I mean, he exploded in the polls and got this result. And it is actually going out to the electorate, going out to citizens and say, okay, listen up. We can see our planet is overheating. I mean, climate crisis is not something we read about. We're seeing it all over Europe. It's warmer, it's wetter, it's wilder, and needs to be tackled. And the answers, it's not coming from the right wing saying, look at the refugees, they're the one who are destroying Europe. They're not coming from when we see right wing starting to push against women's rights, human rights, rights of LGBTQI people. No, it's about creating this transformation together, to prioritize people in this transformation we need to do. And it's a huge transformation. It's the economy, it's businesses, it's everything. But we can actually create good jobs for people. If we transform the whole agriculture industry, which is really hard on the nature in Europe, we can actually produce good local food that people can afford to pay. I mean, what's not to like? So that's the message we're going out with. But it's going to be a struggle. It's not going to be easy elections, because we see a right wing who is trying to point fingers as everything else than what we need to talk about.
Do you expect that this right wing is, that there are different polls. There are polls and there are polls. And there was, I think 6 months ago, we had another meeting here when Gwendolyn was here, and at that time was a bit of uncertainty of how the Green parties will perform. Will it be 5 MEPs more or 5 MEPs less? How are Greens hoping? What are Green hopes in these elections? Is it going to be at least a bit more, or you're looking into a little bit less?
Well, I've been in politics a long time, but not my whole life, and I always expect for the best, and I'm in it for winning. I'm sorry. I mean. See, no, really. So yes, we're looking at some polls where it looks tough in some countries, others it's not. I think it's really up to, do we manage to engage the youth again? Do we manage to engage people in these elections? Because the ones who are going to win the European election this time around are the people who are going to get people down and vote. And we could see what happened in Poland when you actually activated the youth movements, when you activated the women's movement. There was a transformation in the election that nobody thought was possible. So we're looking at really tough elections. That's what I want to emphasize again. It's not a walk in the park. The big danger right now is that we see EPP, which is, I mean, the traditional conservative parties, actually flirting a bit too much with the extreme right. And that's something we have to prevent. So hopefully the result is they cannot get around a majority without Green votes in the parliament. That's what we're fighting for.
Thank you. Biljana, listening to this and the challenges that European Greens are facing, we have our own kind of right-wingers, and they're originating also from some sources of our society. And also, you remember, and we commented also on our 155 groups that we kind of have ahead of these elections, that we were commenting the Dutch elections, and we were talking, can it be reflected somehow or anyhow in Serbia, and in our narrative and in our challenges that are internal. So let's say, my question for you would be, like, how different and how similar are these right-wing movements in Europe and in Serbia? And in our context, how would you define the main challenges for the message of Green left parties in Serbia? And what we talked, and what I would like you to maybe comment a little bit, is that we are now running in a major coalition, and it's sometimes very difficult to convey this message. And I wanted to ask you your opinion on what would be the way forward in this.
All easy questions. Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say, and it's easy to say this in this audience, we could year and a half ago, a little bit more than a year and a half ago, when we campaigned as we must, more and more, and Green Left Coalition, it was much more easy, because then you could be much more open about your own agenda. It was Green Left agenda, and in a way it was more enthusiasm about saying everything you want to say. Of course, again, this was also a coalition. You also had to, of course, have some arrangement and consensus about various issues. But I think we were a novelty. We were brave enough also to say some things that others couldn't, and we enjoyed it, I think, also in this campaign. But many things have changed, and it's a completely different campaign, I would say, because this is not the major label that this is a Green Left coalition. It's not. It's a pro-European democratic opposition, and that's also very important statement. Just to say that, of course, we have different interpretation what the vision of Europe we see, but I guess this is also the case in European Union itself. So, but in a sense, I mean, each elections here during this transformation of the regime that we don't longer call democracy, it's a fight to regain democracy, to democratize the process. But this time around, it's more specific because these elections are coming after mass demonstrations that we initiated after 2 massacres, and that we united over a struggle against violence. And this sounds so basic that anybody should go under the flag of fighting against violence. And of course, then it seems so easy to say violence, we all know what it is, but actually then we realize that it's not so easy, that we could also have different meanings of what it means. So here is the tricky thing then. We are actually trying to fight the main enemy, and that is the regime, and that's they who created this situation, why we no longer have democracy, why we don't have rule of law, why we don't feel safe in any elements of our lives. At the same time, we all fear, and some of us would say we know, but some would say I suspect, that also right-wing, extreme right-wing were also created by this regime. And they call themselves opposition, and in a sense we are opposition as well. And then we are in a situation that maybe with parties that are further away from us ideologically, we are sharing this opposition statement, and then we might be in a situation to negotiate, any, like technical government, whatever. And this is very difficult to even say, and not just, to go ahead with this. But this is the situation where you don't have democracy. This is a situation where you're actually fighting to overcome the system. It doesn't mean it will happen. It doesn't mean this will ever, it might. The elections are the situation, and what happens after elections, that everybody proves their opposition status, whether they were truly against the regime and for the right reasons. And in a way, everybody are saying things about the violence, corruption, criminality, and even some, I have to admit, social agenda, about poverty in this country. Even the right-wing, extreme right-wing, and they are very well at that, even in Europe. I mean, in communicating this, and in some sense, this is where in certain issues we can even align. But then comes other issues that we cannot align, and I think here you can see a lot of similarities between extreme right-wing in European Union and in Serbia, because our extreme right-wing in Serbia are basically copying this, and this is a transnational agenda, especially anti-gender movement, anti-gender mobilization, which is not so strong here as it is in European Union. It exists. We know of this because we are activists. We are also feminist activists. But I think mainstream parties are not aware of this. We are aware of this, and we see the danger in it. And that's why this is the tricky position for us. Yeah, if we are in a situation that we need to make some arrangements, and that's why I think it's we need to be very clear over what we agree, and for what purposes, and how we evaluate if it comes to that. I'm not saying it will. I'm hoping that we win, especially in Belgrade, strongly, that Serbia Against Violence does not need anyone to form the government in Belgrade. And so, but I'm the person who always hopes for the best as Rasmus, but I'm preparing for the worst. Yeah, so that would be my answer. You had so many questions. I don't know if I covered them all.
This is connected, but I think it's also quite interesting to see, and I think you can observe this in European Union, is that right-wingers would have this narrative, Europe of nations, we need to get rid of this and get rid of that, and then when it comes to election results, they also team up they also kind of go to each other, congratulate each other. And I find it a little bit paradoxical. Even our right-wing leader has connections with some of the right-wingers in Europe. And I think it's very interesting that right-wingers also, being, you know, in the essence of their ideology is that they do not want to mix with anybody else. But when it comes to this political bargain, they are kind of very easy to cooperate and congratulate on each other on the same sort of ideology that, yes, we agree to hate each other. I hate you, you hate me, and that's okay. So it's kind of interesting development for the recent years. Kristina, so now we talked like from there were some general statements given as well, and some messages on how do we see ourselves in Greens, and the messages that we want to deliver to the voters. But now we've seen each other in the campaign, and I know also that you come from a small town. I also live in a small town. I also come from a small town. And, you know, particularly in this campaign, how do you feel that this grand messages about the, you know, green politics like environment, energy, anti-discrimination, racial, fight against racial discrimination resonates actually in a small towns, in cities where we go and campaign? And do we campaign green in the small towns? I mean, I think it's a great challenge. I also, in Belgrade, I live in a municipality that is urban and suburban as well. And, you know, when I go talk to them about, I don't know, need to, I don't know, change the old heating systems and change them with the more energy efficient ones, it is really harder because people cannot afford. There is a big energy poverty as well. So I wanted to ask you this, like, when you campaign, do you have a like luxury to campaign? Is it a luxury to campaign green in Serbia?
Okay, I can start with this luxury, because I think that in Serbia everything is luxury. We are now in a system that affects on every institution and on every possible piece of a life that we have. And now when we speak about campaigning and about green politics, I think that these elections are not for that. Now we have people that had mass murders in May, that lost 20 young people and children, and that was a very very hard and very loud bell that awakened us, because I wasn't sure that something or anything could awaken the people in Serbia. I mean, we had so many affairs. I'm listening to the Rasmus, and he says about the healthy food and everything. We have, we tried to export fruits and vegetables, and it was forbidden in European countries because it had so many pesticides. And, you know, it was given back in Serbia, and our children are eating that, you know. So that you can imagine how not normal situation in Serbia is. And when all those children were murdered, it was a very, as I said, loud bell for everybody. And everybody was saying the one sentence: we just need a normal life. And that normal life is a leading role for this campaign, I believe. But when we speak in Belgrade or in my Gornji Milanovac, on wherever, and we speak about the ecology, the rule of law and everything, they say, okay, that's a good thing that you're speaking, but let me live normally, and then we can speak about all the things that you have to give us and to speak about in campaign. So I believe that these are historical elections, and I believe that in this moment it's very important for Serbia, but also for Europe, what will be the results of these elections. Because in Europe, to have in the middle of the West Balkan the man as Vučić is, that is trying to sell everything that we have here in Serbia, that is trying to pollute everything that we have here that was healthy. And if we are trying to speak about democracy and don't have the institutions in Serbia, it's a very hard thing. And I know that we spoke a lot about the elections in Serbia and how the European Union can help us in this. But I believe that now it's the moment that we can help only to ourselves. So I believe that when people go out for these elections and when they vote, and I hope that they will vote for Serbia against violence, that we will finally could speak on the same level with Europe and with European representatives. So I can say that I'm not the activist, I'm a politician, for a very long, a decade or more politician, and I believe that we must give everything so this campaign and these elections must be successful. There is no more time for Serbia to lose and to think that maybe we can negotiate and then we will see. No, there is no more time. We have a polluted air, we have a polluted soil, we have a polluted water. We don't have any more factories that are working as well as they should, because there is no rights for the workers that are very important, yes. And institutions are not working, the laws are not working, so we are really at the end or of the beginning of a normal life. So I can say that will we be a normal country or not? That's the elections about.
If I can just, and this will introduce a new topic as well, is that how about European question? You know, as you spoke, and Biljana as well, we are so consumed with this, what happened to us in this year, that this campaign is almost framed. This is either us or him, or either us or this regime, because we are literally being killed, and our children, and but. I remember the times when the European issue was almost the dividing issue in Serbia. Now in this campaign you will barely hear it. And why is this the case? Like, is it something that... And I remember the campaign last year when Biljana Stojković was a candidate for presidency, and she was also saying that we want to reach European Union in the fastest way, not in the longest possible way. But even these elections were not marked by strong debates about Europe and possible Serbian joining European Union. So why is this the case?
I believe that this normal life means normal life in Europe, because all the people that are leaving Serbia, they are going to Europe to live over there, because they think that these values are values that we need. So I believe that this campaign and speaking about normal life, that the parity for that is European life. And the reason why we don't speak about EU and our joining to EU, it's because Vučić is for EU. Declaratively, he is for EU. So we must make some difference from him. So if we speak about EU, we can confuse people, because we now need normal Serbia. And after that, we will speak about all the values that we need in the EU.
And Rasmus, coming back to this issue, and how is it from the European view towards the Western Balkans? Enlargement has not been high on the agenda of the last two commissions, and a little bit more with this latest one, but not really. It was just, okay, there is some enlargement, but we'll see what happens. And then, obviously, Ukraine war came, and Russian aggression on Ukraine, and suddenly something changed. And it seems like that European Union or the decision makers figured out that they cannot leave this underbelly with the security vacuum, and they thought that maybe it's time to reinvigorate the process. And then we recently have published this Franco-German working paper on the reform of the European Union, and within it there was this circles of enlargement and who will go where and when, but there was also some promise that by 2030 the process needs to be completed from the European side and from the side of the Western Balkans. But then also we were talking about it, is this really because only the geopolitical circumstances have changed. So, which means that if the geopolitical circumstances would change back and peace comes back to Europe, we will again drop back on the agenda? Or is this something that Europe really needs? My question is basically, do you think that Western Balkans is now merely a geopolitical issue, or we really need to go back to the core? That all European countries have a right to accede to the European Union should they fulfill the criteria of democracy, rule of law, human rights, and all the values that we, I think, at least in this room, we stand for.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna over glamorize EU institution for a big part. It is geopolitical question. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, people have been in shock over what happened with the Russian aggression and attack on Ukraine. The war's going on. It's getting closer to EU, and therefore there is this whole question: what is security nowadays in EU? Of course, it's a question, but it had also risen the whole discussion on the values of on which we have based EU, and I think that's interesting, and that's also why it was so positive to see what happened in Poland. I mean, because all of a sudden we also talk about the values of human rights, of freedom of speech, the values of rule of law. So these questions as well is very important also in the discussion of enlargement within EU. Also because we can see, I mean, if we look at what happened with the latest larger enlargement we did, there has been some problems. I mean, we can point to Hungary and see what's going on there, what's going on with the democracy there, what's going on with women's rights, LGBTQI rights, I mean, all these things. And therefore there is the question in EU right now, how to do it. I mean, one thing is to have the Copenhagen criteria, it's good, but what happens after this? How do we make the institution works also when there's all of a sudden a regime working against our common values? So yes, I mean, geopolitical question is important, security is important, I'm not going to lie to you, but the other part of the discussion is there as well. And I think it's very important, especially when we look at the case here in Serbia, is to have this discussion. Also from EU side, I mean, one thing is that normally it's EU institution to government collaboration, but what kind of collaboration can also be with a civil society that had showed in its force here in the last year? How can we go out and work with them as well? Because we need to look into the whole process of enlargement. How is it actually working as a two-way street? It's a collaboration of doing something. But there's also a work to do internally, of course, in EU on how do we do it? Because I mean, why I cherish EU so much as I do, it's not because of the institution or the flag or all these things. It's actually when you go through the treaties that we're building on human rights, we're building on equal rights, we're building on rule of law, and for me that is what I cherish much more than anything else. So how do we take this forward?
And looking into the campaign that is coming, that is going to come into let's say heat somewhere in April, May, is this issue of enlargement or completing the enlargement at all going to be an issue in elections? For example, for the Greens and the Green parties, would the European voters look at the enlargement similar to the migration issue, or they differentiate this in their head? Would they be like, you know, seeing this, oh my God, 6 new countries that will, burden our budget, and we will have to support and sustain and pay and this and that, That's how, average voters think. And then maybe the parties, because of that, they shy away from, talking about things that are not that pleasant. But will the Greens send some different message or not?
I mean, of course, it's part of what we're going out campaigning on. It's part of our manifesto. But I mean, this is not the biggest question. I mean, it's actually the same case in the European elections as it is in the elections here. People are worried about their everyday life. I mean, people I mean, we have Europeans challenged by energy poverty, people who cannot, I mean, people who go hungry to bed, who cannot feed their children, people don't have proper housing. I mean, that is questions as well. So I mean, enlargement is not going to be the big discussion theme in these European elections, but it's part of as well, how do we see the union develop? And therefore it's an important question. But most importantly is that we also link this again to people. I mean, again, the enlargement is not just about saying now we have a external border. I mean, where it is, it's about millions of people and their everyday life as well. I mean, how can we transform that? How can we be sure to have a Europe that is based on fundamental rights? And how can we make a Europe that's also, I mean, making sure that we don't have kids who don't go to school, that we don't have kids who are freezing and not eating? I mean, that's a question, and it's in that sense I think we should talk about enlargement much more than just being an institutional question, because I'm sorry, I mean, before I came into politics 10 years ago, I didn't care about institutions. I cared about that where we're dealing with the climate crisis, where we're making sure that people had proper health care. I mean, institution is for politicians to discuss. It's not going to be the big discussion among voters.
Biljana, and when we talk about European Union, and we have our also disappointments, and we had our criticism of how, and you mentioned part of it, Kristina also mentioned part of it, talking about judicial reform that everybody praised, even in this last progress report it was praised. Then, not to mention the issue of Rio Tinto and the way how it was communicated, not by all European political options and groups, but some of them, yes, they did somehow support the development. And then we, on the other side, we are here and we are claiming that we are the most pro-European citizens, that we are those who respect mostly the rule of law and the democracy and the human rights and the LGBTQ plus rights and all of it. And then we have this wall in European Union, and then we need to somehow say, yes, we are still in favor of Europe, but you know, we cannot accept all of it. It's like a load of BS coming from there as well. So how do we tilt this in the direction that we do, do continue the path? Although I'm not for the path, I'm for the membership, because path can go forever. Path is somewhere.
Yeah, I liked what Rasmus said about what he felt before entering politics. Like, you didn't care about institutions, you wanted, something to be done, like some service, health service. And I think, in a way, whether we at that time thought about it deliberately or just it was an impulse, this was our decision, that we actually tried to convey the feeling that what we are doing, what we want, this is European, and we don't have to say it, but this is just recognizable. So the consequences of this is that I, being an assistant professor, having at the Faculty of Political Science, having a lot of students, former students, they are now working in a think tank for European integration process. They meet me at some events and they say, "Oh, professor, you don't talk about European Union that much. What's your position over staged accession and stuff like that?" And true, we should talk more about it, but there is a reason why we don't, and that's because for 20 years it was the only talk, basically. But then it was such a talk that it lost the content. It was all about conditionality. We need to do this because EU said that. Whether EU really said that or not, it was also used to justify why we do some things, like EU asked. So we don't justify to the people why it serves them, but we do it because EU said so. And then EU became something very bad, something that forces us to do things against our will, against our interest. And it was a useful tool for politicians as well, but it was detrimental to the process of Europeanization as the way we understand it. So in a way, we try not to do this thing because it simply doesn't work. And in a way, I think maybe in running away from this, way of doing politics, we might have gone too far of not talking enough about EU, but the reason also is of what you said. EU didn't help in this period, because that was the period where EU, as Kristina said, was perceived as strong supporter of this regime. Like, they were the darlings of the European Commission in various situations. Of course, the consequences of this regime was destruction of the party system, of the opposition, democratic opposition party system, and then it became, we came into a situation that we are not apparently seen as credible interlocutors for the many EU politicians when they would come here. So they would not talk to us, they would not see us as credible alternative, and we would not be trusted, you know, in a sense, as relevant. They were relevant. They would, you know, they were partners. And of course, there is a part of institutional logic there, because you have to meet, you know, who is the president, who's the prime minister. That's all clear. But opposition is also an institution in a country, you know. So it should be recognized, especially when you also recognize that this is not a proper democracy. So I think that's why also these elections are important, because we are now one united democratic European list, and this is a statement of a kind. But also because in a way we also want, as you said about Poland, we also want to send the message, and we are doing that now, I think with stronger voice and more loudly, that European Union, we understand the geopolitical situation, and it's good that maybe we have some, how to say, good luck to use this situation, that this is an opportunity for us all. But this is not a good opportunity if it comes at a cost that we don't have to do any reform in terms of rule of law and human rights, because then this is disservice to us. It's disservice to EU, because then you have a new Hungary, and it's disservice to us because it's much harder than to fight back these tendencies that you have in Hungary. That's why the Polish case is interesting, that maybe we can learn something from it. So in a way, we are also in this dilemma. What do we want? We want to be members of the EU, but not in a situation that would actually make this regime stronger. And this is what this co-optation of the EU narrative by this regime has done. That it gave some legitimacy. We lost a topic that is credible, in which we believe. We had to talk about different Europe, and what was this different Europe? Who could use, you know, how can you convey it and visualize this to ordinary people who don't care about institutions, just about, you know, something that you have or do not have. So in a way, that's why I think we were all a bit lost and confused, and it is difficult to fight this narrative. I think for us as Green Left, it's less difficult to explain to Green Left constituency that these are our values, and that also we don't want just any Europe, we fight for social green Europe. So in a way, this is a bit easier, but we want to also broaden audience, because we don't talk just to Green Left. We also want, of course, to transform some citizens to become Green Left. But also we are democratizers, so we need to talk about this to a further audience, and then it becomes more complicated. And that's why I think one important thing is that I often get asked this question abroad about the number of people, citizens supporting EU integration process that is decreasing, and we feel like we have to justify this. Like, then we are not good candidate, because if people don't want to be in the EU, why would the EU care? And we need to explain, and we are trying to explain, that even these numbers are huge success when you have in mind a decade of anti-EU propaganda of this regime, that it was the darling of the European Commission. So, I mean, this is the situation that we are dealing with. That's why it's so complicated, but it is what it is, and that's why I think it's important to regain and resignify this language of what it means to talk about European integration?
Great and difficult, and it's clear that it's very difficult. But let's imagine that it's 18th of December, early morning, and we won. And so we won. So we won, and we need to kind of, by the New Year's, or let's say 15th December, assemble the new National Assembly and start negotiating the government. And we know how we negotiated the coalition deal, so we can imagine how this will be. But how do we go about it, Kristina, actually, like about European integration? None of the issues is really going to disappear. Kosovo issue is not resolved. Rule of law cannot come overnight. Sanctions to Russia are not introduced. So none of these hard choices that any government will need to do are not done. And then we need to kind of say to the people, oh yes, of course, we are now going in a Godspeed to Brussels, and we kind of need to go back on track. And I think it's going to be interesting to see this with the new government. But I wanted to also ask you, what do you think are the main obstacles, like from our perspective, green left? What are the key obstacles? How do we overcome them as a new government? I know it's, again, a very easy question. But yeah, you have very few. Yeah, so because we need to give floor to the audience a little bit before the food arrives. So yeah, this is the question.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Yeah, yes. Nobody can do this. Okay, so it's the exactly like 19 December, we can say. Yeah, I'm a very simple politician. I'm not used to complain and to say, oh, it's their fault and we have to do this, but it's very hard and everything. I believe that we need to do that. And it's just simple. First question, second question, third question. When I spoke last year with Dritana Bazovic from Montenegro, and I asked him about this agreement with the church that he made, electoral agreement, and I said, how did you do that? Because we have a Montenegrin and Serbs and all of those people over there that wasn't prepared to do that. And he says, look, we needed to do that, so we did it. So I believe that that's the answer to your question. We really need to do that because we want to go to European Union. We have these chapters that we need to close, and we need people who are best for that to do that. We need to solve the problem about Kosovo, and we need to think about the people that are living in Kosovo, and we need to sit and to explain and to see what are the situations that we can do that. Political party Zajedno speaks, I think, a year or year and a half about their solution for Kosovo, actually for solution for the Western Balkans. We are speaking about the international conference where all the Western Balkan countries should sit with the intermediators from Europe and to find a solution. If that takes 7 days, 15 days, a month, 3 months, never mind. We need to find a solution because we are all the same people in the Western Balkans and we need to live normally and we need to live in Europe. So if we want that, we can do that. So I don't know what was the agreement about the coalition, but I know that these Serbian people in Serbia are speaking about this one list, I think, for 3 or 4 years, and it was our fault that we had so many political parties are in elections that was before. Now we did what the citizen asked for. A citizen wants to go to Europe, so why don't Serbia go to Europe? If citizens want to live normally and not to have the question of Kosovo on their mind, will there be a conflict or not? Will we have the military conflict or something like that? So we need to do that. That's why we are politicians. That's why I said I'm not the activist, I'm the politician. If we need to do something, we need to sit and solve that. Was it okay? Thank you.
Okay. So thank you to all. I mean, we will have a little bit more time to chat, but I wanted to actually to open a little bit floor for the audience. We did try to address some issues, but maybe some questions remained, and then please raise your voices. And somebody will need to start. Yes, Natalie.
So I'm going to ask a bit of a challenging question that I don't even know an answer to. How can we work together as a Green European family to have a European Green Deal that won't be extractive to the periphery? For instance, I assume you know about the dealings with mining of lithium and all of these things. Well, that means that, powering electric cars and everything. So this is one of the things, and how can we have, fair distribution of resources and a Green Deal that can be just for all? So this is just one, easy question for beginning.
Should I fix that now? What I think is the problem is actually that we haven't talked about it as such before. I mean, we have talked about the green transition, then we're talking about social issues, and for me, they're totally interlinked. I mean, I don't see any conflict between having a real transition of our energy network, so we have true renewable energies all over Europe at the same time, because we know it's cheaper to produce, so the energy prices will go down, people can actually afford it. There will be jobs in constructing the network we need to have the infrastructure for energy. So I mean, every time we look at these things, they're interlinked. It's the same when it goes to the discussion of mining. It's the same when we talk about where to put windmills. It's always like, okay, is it okay to destroy this piece of nature because we want to do something good for the climate? No, because we can actually do both at the same time. We don't need to mine these things. We can also put money into research, do other kinds of batteries, so forth, so forth. So what I think it's our task right now as a green family, whether you're in Serbia or in Denmark, where I'm from, is actually to come with the whole story of how all these things are interlinked. That it's only if we do the transition in our food system, so we don't destroy the planet, we can actually produce healthier food, which is cheaper. I mean, it should be easy, but I don't think we have been good enough. And I mean, I always think it's important when you have political discussions to point some fingers back at yourself, and really the story we've been trying to go out and talk to the electorate about has been too much in silos, and we need to bring them together and say, I mean, this is about social transformation, it's about the green transition, and then it's about fundamental rights as well, because it's interlinked. I mean, you're pointing at mining, and we see again and again and again, not just here but in other countries, that it's local communities who are paying the price for this. It's the right of the people in the areas where they're living. So again, I mean, we should be more clever in when we're going out talking to electorate and finding those dots, saying it is about connecting the dots. Then we can do the green transition in the social balanced way, and actually we can live a much more fun life at the same time.
I believe that we in Serbia need to change the perspective, because all the mining are allowed by the government in Serbia. So when we will be in government, and when we start to speak about green left government in Serbia, we will speak about mining on a lot of different perspectives. So we will speak about changing perspective of cheaper food and health food. So we will try to make that different. So we are here like in a cloth of Vučić, so we cannot think normally.
Other questions? Yes, over there.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I have actually two questions. So one is on the idea of how should we as activists and politicians work on ensuring that we sort of develop a European identity here. Because even when we work with our Western European neighbors, we sometimes do feel left out. Sometimes it's simply on the economic basis, and sometimes it is a difference in culture. And the second question is directed towards Rasmus, because we in the Young Greens of Serbia have worked together with the Young European Greens a lot, and recently Benedetta, co-spokesperson of FOAG, has announced her position or her candidacy as lead candidate. So what was the reaction of the European Greens to her candidacy, and do you think that, what are her odds of being Spitzenkandidat for? Because honestly, I was very inspired by her candidacy, being that she is such an inspiring person in general, and her cause is noble, and this would make her also the first person from South Europe to be lead candidate. So what are her odds, basically?
So first question is about identity, and then we will move to the other one. So who will go for identity? Biljana.
I wasn't sure that I actually understood the first question about identity. I mean, was it about, Andrei, was it about whether we share the same identity throughout Europe as Greens?
I mean, that is partially the message we have as Greens, but I feel that it is very hard to spread it. So how can we communicate this?
Yeah. I was very, how to say, puzzled, but then I realized that this is it. When I heard the lecture of a deputy mayor of Zagreb, Daniela Dolenec from Možemo, she gave a lecture a couple of months ago here in Belgrade at my own faculty. And she's also an associate professor of political science, but also, green left politician. And she then spoke about the experience of running Zagreb, but also about this experience of, building this green left movement from Slovenian case to Croatian case to Serbian case. And then she said, but we are grassroots, we are authentic. This green left, this is not imported from Western Europe. And this is true. At first, when she said it, I was like, really? Is that the case? And then I realized, yes, that's the case, because we have a specific blend of green left as post-socialist countries with some, previous experiences and struggles in period of post-socialism, but also environmental destruction and everything. And especially our environmental activism oftentimes, when it comes also to Rio Tinto case, is against something that is called green, It's called green transition, but not for us, but for somebody else. So, and that struck me that, like, we share something, but it's not the same, it's not the same actually. But at the same time, I think this is good, because we are oftentimes here attacked like, we're not authentic. Those opposing us, they say, Viola von Kramon comes from Germany and tells you what to do. You don't have your own voice, which is not true. So I don't know if this answers your question. I think that's the beauty of Europe, that we should have different historical genealogies of our developments, but we can then share our identifications and then build joint identity. Not that we just, copy what Greens in Germany or Sweden have done. We have our own problems. We should learn, but maybe there's something to be learned by, our experience as well.
Indeed, and I think also what is important is also to when we are together as a green family. I mean, you come with experience. I mean, I can learn from. I'm from a small, rich country in the north of Europe. I'm from a political green party that's been existing since the 60s. But I learn a lot about how are you organizing, how are you dealing with certain topics. I mean, we can learn from each other. So it's also about taking. I mean, I think politics is very much, whether you're grassroots, whether you're an elected politician, it's also about taking leadership upon you and say, okay, I want to help lead. And it's also about giving some of yourself to the people you're meeting with head held high. Benedetta, I mean, of course, people were happy that she was running. She's a fantastic politician. The chances we have 4 fantastic candidates to be Spitzenkandidat in the Green Party, and how they're standing against each other, I have no idea. I know all 4 of them is fantastic. Maybe we should have done like Alde did last time and have 4, because they're truly great. But what is important about this is also about talking about young people in politics, because it's so important that we empower young people to be there as well. I'm very happy in Denmark. The lead of our list is Kira, who is the youngest MEP ever elected, and she's leading the list in Denmark. I mean, we need young people to engage in politics. That also means we need to make seats available where they can take a seat at the table and not just waiting for it.
Here we have.
I have a question about this green revolution, which is on its way, and it's actually exponential curve. It goes faster and faster. But I understand there is a race with the time, because are we going to have time to do green revolution before all this temperature or raising levels come? And what are discussion in EU Parliament about this time race?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Predrag. I wanted to build. Probably we need, and European Greens and Greens need much more ambitious climate goals. But this is what also Natalie asked. With more ambitious climate goals, we will need more electrifying economy and more mining somewhere. And now European Parliament soon will vote about this Critical Raw Material Act. And my question is how Greens will vote on this, and also how is it possible to have these ambitious climate goals without mining if we have still this same economical paradigm which is based on all the time have economical growth. And I have one more question. My other question is, we see in some countries Greens are in coalition with black or with conservatives, even sometimes with even pretty far right. What is your opinion about that?
Rasmus, most is for you, I think.
I wouldn't sit here as a Green politician if I didn't believe that we could do something about it and make it. Do I believe that it's going fast enough right now? No, it doesn't. Not at all. Not nearly. Because, and it's a bit linked to the other question about economy and all this understanding. I mean, it's also linked to the changes, not just a change of energy form, or not just a change of how we're producing food or things like that. It has to change society on how are we consuming. I mean, how do we build up another kind of economy? And I think it's been great to follow what Philippe Lambert from the European Parliament, from the Green, has been doing the last year, really working very high level and very thoughtful on post-growth economy. How does it look? How do we do it? Because we're so used to this form of economy we have right now that we think it's, if we don't have a constant growth, I mean, the world will fall apart. So of course we need these changes as well, because you can also look at other areas of life, again, to go back to people's everyday life. I mean, what we're seeing right now is also more and more people have problems with their mental health care. People are stressed. It's like a pandemic as well around in all societies, because we have built up the form of society built on consummation and all these things we have. So we have to change these things. And it's not going nearly fast enough to do the changes, but I remember back in 2013 when I started talking about post-growth in Denmark as one of the first politicians saying it, people thought I was sick. And just this spring there was this huge Congress in the European Parliament where you had top elected people from around Europe talking about the issue. So things can change very fast all of a sudden. And I think we can create a better society as well in doing that. I don't know how the group is going to vote on specific items. I'm not part of the European Parliamentary Group, so I don't know the discussion going on, how they are voting there. That for somebody else to answer.
Is there any other question? Go ahead. Isa.
Hi, my name is Philip. I'm also from the Green Youth of Serbia, and I actually have the question that was addressed in the panel amongst all of you, but from my experience also as an activist on the European level, I simply feel like I need to ask this question once more. Namely, last year I had a chance of participating in some local European youth event in Varaždin in northern Croatia. And over there, members of European Parliament from EPP and also from the S&D faction that originally come from Croatia were talking to youth regarding the European perspective of the Western Balkan region. And there have been various, I would say, reactions from youth coming from Serbia, but also from North Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, and so on and so forth, of the struggle that young people have in our region when it comes to enlargement fatigue, both within our countries that we're so struggling to overcome, but also from something that we see in the countries of the European Union, something that also kind of discourages in order to fight for the European future. So I have a question for all of you, basically. How do we as activists and as people that are aspiring to hold political offices, if we are not holding any right now, how do we overcome this with our voters, with people that we are working with, that we indeed belong to the European Union, that there is no other future for Serbia than the European Union? And how also that's on the internal plan, but how can you as representative of the European Greens assure us that we indeed belong to Europe, and can you give us some, I would say, sense of hope that we are indeed part of the larger European family? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants first? The question is for all.
The question is for all, yes, but I believe that the way how we feel is coming from us, and as long as we believe that we are the part of the Europe, we will be the part of the Europe. The thing is that now we have these people in power that are declaratively for Europe, but they're doing everything else against all the values that are in Europe. So I believe that the climate will change from December the 19th, and I believe that we will have a more space to express our European values. And when we separately express those European values, there will be a feeling that we are the part of Europe. I can say something like.
Yeah, but I think again it's a big back to what we were talking about. Not talk so much about the institution, but talk about what does it mean. I mean, when you are out as an activist, what does it mean to feel part of the European Union? I mean, why are you fighting for this? I think that's the important thing to begin to talk about. Sometimes we start, soon we go into technical questions about enlargement and the negotiations, and we need to open chapter 4 or 5, and how is it going with Article 27? People don't care, and they shouldn't care. I mean, what does it mean for them in the everyday life of a young Serbian student to be part of EU? That's the important part of it. And I can only say that for us, of course, Western Balkans, of course, Serbia should be part of EU. It's a process. That is clear as well. And also what you said, I mean, about the lack of democracy here. It's also a process that's internally here. It's not just about the big bad EU postponing negotiations or pushing it out. It has to be a two-way street. And I think it's that engagement that is important. Also for us as a political party, I mean, we also here, we come in quite often, we have a close relationship with your parties, again, also to have the exchange and have the build-up, and we have that across Western Balkan. So try not to focus on institution, let's focus on what this is about. What are the values? What are the everyday life change that it means? And then I forgot to answer your question about coalitions before. And I just want to say what I really like about our Green family is that we always try and go in where we can change things. I mean, we go into hard negotiations. You have done it here as well with the coalition. And that is, for me, the nature of being Green as well, is trying to get things done. And we can say, for example, in Austria, where the Greens are in government with a conservative party, they're actually making a difference. And I think it's about being able and being also, I mean, we should all the time compromise, because democracy is also about meeting each other in differences. Never be compromised, never go too far, never challenge what you actually believe in. But democracy is also about meeting with people you don't agree with and find solutions.
To try to give an additional answer to Philip's question, I think maybe in combination to what Andre asked about identity, I think there are some problems that are, youth problems of everyone. Of course, maybe some people experience them differently depending on what society they belong to, how, whether they're more rich or poor, in a sense, what is your class, what is your education, etc. But I think that youth is struggling now everywhere. I mean, this is the situation that generation feel that they will worse than their parents lived. So I think it's the same in Serbia as in, Greece and Poland, Denmark. And so maybe thinking about these common problems that are overcoming boundaries, and then in a sense you become part of the same constituency in creating solutions for these problems. And they, again, for these big problems, they are not limited at the boundaries of countries. So if you think in that sense, I think maybe if campaigning from Serbia, you can see, there is some good resolution of European Parliament. I mean, of course, in its own right, it's boring to say that, but the content of it, I can say this is a solution that we should campaign for here. Then that's again some kind of a link. That's how you hold on to it, and then you prove again to others, here the group of people doing this, and we do that over there. And it's kind of a connection, I think, and it stays. Sometimes we are depressed. We don't really see the purpose of it, but I think joint problems create joint, common solutions, and create belonging and identities over this. And if we have this belonging, I think we will find a way to one day be together, institutionalized in solving these problems.
So we are running out of time a little bit. So I will allow myself to allow us to approach the food and wine quite soon. I wanted to say that I first want to thank Rasmus, Biljana, and Kristina for really with ease responding to these easy questions that we posed. I want to commend also the Green Youth of Serbia for speaking up, and please guys speak up all the time. And also ask these easy questions as well. For me, whenever our friends from European Greens come or when we go, for me these debates are always allow us to step a little bit out of our usual daily routine and foresee a little bit better future for us. And I thank also again the panelists for painting us this future this evening. And I think we learned a little bit more than we knew, let's say, hour and a half ago. And with that note, I want to thank you for your participation, and thank you guys for coming. And please, let's enjoy a little bit more this evening, and then tomorrow let's go back to campaigning.